Yeah, so how about Jameson trying to get him to do his homework this morning? That was ridiculous. What was that? Crying to bribe him with pizza?
You don't get him to try to do homework enough. That's standard.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that was a nightmare. Yeah, but otherwise, I mean, I don't know. How's your day going so far? It's going pretty good. Anything else weird happened to you?
Real estate related?
Life related. Let's go life.
No, how about you?
Honestly, yeah, everything. By the time
I'll get
Dan
there.
got here, okay, seriously, by the time Dan got here, I had fought with an 8-year-old to do homework. I had bribed him with pizza, successfully managed to get him out the door, then engaged in a legal battle regarding a sale that had happened like a month ago.
Right. It's closed, but the seller doesn't want to pay your commission.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my morning was pretty locked in. It was good.
And the result, am I getting paid?
No, not today. Not today, Green. Not today.
All right.
Yeah. You are not getting paid today. So, on that note, let's talk about this. We have a great new title for our podcast. We got that locked in this morning as well.
We've almost decided on the title for the
But no,
podcast.
Marion came up with it. What is it? What's the title? What's the title, Marion?
Real nonsense.
Real nonsense.
Working title?
Yeah, working title, real
Actual title.
nonsense.
Craig's not sold.
Greg's never going to be sold. This is what you want.
I would love it if I was the one who came up with it.
Okay, so we internalize it, pretend
Yeah.
you came up
Can
with
we
it,
just-
give Marion no credit,
Right.
so that you'll feel
That's
like
all
it's
right.
yours.
You
Yeah.
guys pay me, so I'm fine.
So real nonsense, because our lives are full of real nonsense. And that's what this podcast is all about.
Right. Not shit list.
Not shit list. Though all the real nonsense makes it onto the shit list.
Mhm.
So that's how that works. That's how you do it.
Great.
So, I mean, the spirit of this podcast is to capture all the nonsense, all the dumb shit that happens in the background that you're like, I can't make this up. Like, literally, of course, there's normal day-to-day activity. There's, people buying and selling homes, people going to the lawyers to close their deals, people going to their mortgage brokers to get their mortgage. There's all the real normal stuff. And truthfully, 95% of your real estate and my real estate career is filled with normal stuff. But then every now and again, like the dumbest thing happens, and there's really like no place for us to talk about that. We've really had no outlet. And I know for a fact that there are realtors everywhere right now, at least everywhere in North America right now, like literally coming across this exact thing where you're like, this doesn't come up in a workbook. There's no real playbook for this. Sometimes even your broker will be at a loss because they've never seen anything like this come up. And this podcast is the home of all that dumb shit, I would say. I think that's how I would describe this podcast.
Yeah, the normal day-to-day stuff would be a boring podcast. Agreed.
So I've been in real estate I've been selling real estate actively as a licensed realtor in Victoria, BC since 2010. Before that, I was working as an assistant to a busy builder. And so, and that kind of started in about 2005. So, that's sort of my kind of journey in this real estate career. And literally, the stuff that's making it onto the shit list out of all of those years, like let's say a combined 15 years of real estate experience, it boils down to a handful of like 20 stories, right? So again, these aren't things that you're going to come across all the time, but when you do hit them, they're so extremely frustrating and heartbreaking and heart-wrenching because literally nobody around you knows how to deal with it. They've never come across it before. They have no idea what to do with this stupid thing that's happening.
Or maybe they have. Maybe some people have had the exact same story. Maybe this is common stuff.
Okay.
Maybe everyone else can commiserate with all of this nonsense that we put up with.
If this is your day-to-day, God bless you. God bless you.
Yeah, and so you've been doing this for 10 years here on Vancouver Island. I joined forces about 5 years ago, 2016, 6 years ago. And that's when we started our team. And when we really started to move some volume and have some success. And it's been great ever since. We've been each year getting better, bigger and better.
Yeah, it's true.
Collecting more nonsense stories.
Yeah. So volume wise, we are, oh gosh, we probably should have had our total sales volume kind of ready for today. Maybe that's something we can kind of bring up next time. But volume wise, my top out year in real estate is hovering at about 65 deals a year for or 65 deals. And we've sold just under 1,000 homes now combined, I'd say. So
That was such a rough year when you sold 65 deals. Before we had assistants, it was just me and you and our one admin.
yeah.
We're much smarter now. 65 is a lot easier than it used to be.
Yeah, fair. So now running one of the top teams in Victoria, BC. Composition of our team is 3 full-time admins and about 12 agents at the moment. We've kind of oscillated from 20, anywhere from 10 to 20 agents over the last couple of years. So that's sort of the composition of who we are and what our business is. All right, Greg, tee this up for us. So today, our first nonsense story, our first really dumb thing that happened is actually one of my first experiences as well. And it was as I was transitioning out of being an assistant into becoming a real estate agent, and it's also my first home purchase, which I'm actually feeling that it was lucky that this happened to me and not a client, because I probably would have been losing my mind.
Yeah, I think that you were still selling new homes at the show home. I don't know that you were a real estate agent at this point.
I was kind of, yeah.
You were just getting your license.
Sure. Yeah, just transitioning.
Still pretty new, especially to, going into people's homes and seeing people's lives. Whereas, selling a new home, that's pristine.
Yeah.
There's none of the baggage that comes with that.
Totally, yeah. And you have, like, when you're selling new construction, you have a closing team, and you have people that, like, you're doing sales in a beautiful sales center, and everything is the same every single day. You're not really going into people's homes, and then you have a closing team that does the closing and the deficiencies. So, it was definitely a wake-up call going into someone's house. So you tee it up. Tell us.
So having said that,
how did it go?
This is your first home purchase.
Yeah.
And how did you view the property? I mean, you started right from the start walking to the place. It was a problem, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. So, I mean, I'm looking at properties. I'm about 24-ish years old. And so I can't afford much. I really think that it's worth stating that, like, my first home, I bought the cheapest house on the best block that I could afford. So it was in Edmonton, Alberta, and I wanted to be in an area that was way beyond my means. So I really had to get the fixer-upper of all fixer-uppers to be in this particular neighborhood near White Avenue. And so when I walked into this house, the walls were like painted black and the ceiling was painted red. And all the windows were boarded up. And I, being the young, optimistic buyer that was so excited about getting into the market, I was like, I can work with this. I can totally make this work. Coat of paint here and there. And I was ready to, like, get into my first home, really. So that was the place that I found.
All right. And this is a vampire house.
Yeah. So it's the vampire house.
Yeah, and obviously, that was the only one hiccup? Everything else was pristine? Like,
No.
there was loads of garbage in the backyard. There was, it was a mess, right? Yeah. It's very outdated.
Yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing you expect to see in, like, a foreclosure sale or something, where, like, the words "as is, where is," when you see those words, that was all the things of my first home.
Yeah.
Like, there was, yeah.
Did you get that one inspected?
Yeah, I actually...
You did, right? Because there was one of the main beams of the house in the crawl space was being held up by a car jack.
Yeah,
that's
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a structural car jack, though.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sure.
And it was fine. The place was still standing 10 years later. But, like, that's the degree of fixer-upper that this home was.
And lots of people have bought lots of shitty houses.
Yeah.
The wrinkle on this one was when you actually took the keys, you're going to move in, and what happened?
Okay, so it's possession day. I pull up. I'm so excited. I signed everything at the lawyers. I'm ready to rock and roll. And the owner of the home was sitting there.
The vampire.
So I opened up the front. Well, I don't know if it was a vampire, but the dude. So I opened up the front door. I'm looking around, and he's like, "Hi," and he, like, just waves at me. He's, like, sitting in the bedroom, and I was like, "Oh my God, hi!" Like, all of his stuff was still there. Like, I'm walking through on my possession day, couch, everything, all his furniture is still there. He's still there, and he just waves at me, and he goes, "Hey, I'm gonna need another 2 weeks to move." And I was like, "What do you mean you're going to need another 2 weeks truck out front. I'm ready to move in, ready to move out of my parents' house. I should note this is like my first move out. And anyway, and then he's still there. I also have 2 roommates moving in on this day, so they're about to pull up at any minute. And then anyway, I'm like arguing with the guy. I'm like, no, you can't be here. Like, I am moving in right now today. And he goes, okay. And he pulls a duffel bag. He just whips a duffel bag off of a dresser, like that's just nearby, throws a couple of items of clothing in it, and walks out the back door. And that was it. We never saw him. He just left. He just left all of his stuff and all of his junk everywhere and walked out the back door.
He's kind of my hero right now. That's awesome.
Right.
So you got a house full of awesome stuff in the house.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure you can imagine, like, if somebody's got like black painted walls, a red painted ceiling, just throws the stuff in a duffel bag and walks out the back. This is not the person that has the level of furniture that I'm imagining. Like, the house was not how I wanted it to be, right? So now I've got, like, you know, roommates moving in, and I've got like this whole house of furniture to move and get out of, you know, before I can actually move into my first place. Yeah.
What do you do in this situation?
Yeah.
Who do you call?
So I called the realtor, and so at the time I just used the realtor.
Not the lawyer?
Yeah, so it's a lot. No, I called the realtor. I called her immediately, and I was like, hey, listen, so this is what happened. I explained the situation, and I was like, I need this stuff out of here. And then we came to the agreement that I would move everything into the garage in the back and give him, like, you know, a few days or like a week to come and pick it up, and then I could start moving in. But so, like, my roommates show up, and instead of moving in, we're literally moving this guy's stuff out of the house and into the garage in the back.
Can I share that I was one of those roommates? That was actually...
I wasn't gonna talk about that today.
I was preparing to move in. I got handle this shitstorm too, so...
Fair enough. I didn't know if we were doing this in the third person or like in a different voice. But yes. So you were one of those roommates. How did you feel, Greg, moving into that?
I was even more clueless than you were, and at least you had some experience. But is that normal? No? You telling me that's not normal?
Oh my God, you thought it was normal? You thought it was normal that all the person's stuff was still there?
The house is painted black. I don't know. What's normal?
Okay, interesting. So I had the bar for my roommates was very low, thank God. We called, we gave the guy.
And what did the realtor do?
I mean, she tried to get a hold of him, tried. Obviously, you know, she wasn't having success. Like, this wasn't a person that, I don't know what was going through their minds, but she just couldn't reach them after that day. And so, we left the stuff there for about a week, and then we had to have it hauled away. So junk removal, some donations, all that. And that was the last we saw of Mr. I don't know, just the last we saw of him. We gotta find a name for him. I don't know. You know.
So you've done thousands of transactions since then. Yeah. This hasn't repeated itself. What can you do to make sure that it doesn't repeat itself? That someone's not showing up there surprised that they can't just live with you for a few weeks.
Yeah, sure. On possession. Okay, so I feel like since that day, so obviously telling that story, first of all, it's like a hyperbole, right? It's like the extreme possible version of like the seller just still being there on selling day, on key day.
Which does happen.
I mean, it can happen. And so I feel like there's a couple of things that we might be able to take out of this and maybe even understand as like realtors working with our clients. Obviously, having someone still being there begging to stay for an extra couple of weeks is extreme. But for me, there's a couple of things that since then, when I look back on that story and I see kind of milder versions of that coming out, like, you know, I can see ways that people may or may not know. So 2 things that I think can be happening. Number 1, you see sellers having extreme emotional attachment to their homes and having a hard time letting go, even on key release. And so, like, even though that was the most extreme example, like the seller still being there, I have shown up early for key releases where the seller is still there. I've even had a key release where the seller stood in their front yard and cried right up until a minute before my buyers showed up with their moving truck. And even that's hard because you're trying to like manage
that would kill the mood of your buyers. Yeah,
totally. Like, it's a buzzkill for sure. There's nothing worse than your exciting moving day and the seller's there emotionally not wanting to let go. So I feel like that is something that, you know, that we want to be conscious of when we're working with our sellers and really understand where they are emotionally with letting go of the home. Like if this has been a family home, there could be some, you know, attachment there that we need to deal with. The second thing that comes to mind for me, like when I think back on that story, is does your seller fully understand the contract? You know what I mean? And do sellers understand the finer points of the contract and what's expected of them and what their duties are in this whole process? Because what can happen is often, you know, when you're in the negotiation stage, and believe me, I would probably make it onto my own shit list in some situations, because what happens is the big thing that everybody's focused on and what's so exciting is the negotiation of the big 5 points, like what I call them. And of course, price is usually one of the biggest things. Everybody's so focused on price. What am I getting for my house? You know, what am I selling it for? That's the really like sexy, juicy part of selling your home. And then the other kind of other points, there's a few mixed in there, but you know, what deposit is the seller or is the buyer putting down? And then, you know, what are the conditions in terms of the sale? Once those get dealt with, and you know, if you're in Canada, they typically get dealt with like in the, you know, 7 business days, 7 business days of condition removal of our due diligence period. I know, like if you're in the States, you're going to have more of an escrow period, and I won't touch that because that's not really the point of this. But so there's a defined time that you're kind of dealing with the larger points of the contract. And if you're, especially in this day of electronic signing, if you're just slipping the contract in front of your seller and being like, here's the 5 points you need to focus on, sign, your clients, your sellers may not actually be reading the contract and may not be going through the fine point. And even if they are reading it, they might not be understanding the legal jargon, right? Like I literally had a client the other day say to me, this is gobbledygook. And I was like, yeah, fair enough. Let's go through and let's read it properly. So the fact that they have to be out at a specific day, on a specific day, at a specific time, in a specific fashion, may have, like, the finer points of that may not have been discussed with the client. It's very easy in a fast-paced market when things are going really fast, especially with multiple offers, to just let some of those go. I mean, there's even points in the contract about when the seller's insurance is on the hook in case of a fire, or versus when the buyer's on, you know, there's so many like finer points that I'm not sure really get touched on normally. Right? Like when you're explaining your contracts to your sellers. So, I mean, I don't know what happened with
okay. So that's great. That's what the seller's agent should have done. You would do in that situation. But what would you, as a, you know, new Patricia agent buying this house, what could you have done to prevent this from happening, if anything?
So, I mean, the preventative piece comes when you're explaining your contracts to your people, and really.
No, as a buyer.
Oh, you mean
as a buyer's agent?
Buyer?
Make sure, hey, I see this house. This looks like you get that feeling, right? You're like, oh, these people are really not taking care of this house.
Yeah.
They're, you know, maybe you drove by a week before and you're like, everything is still there.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. And even a week before is too soon to tell. Like, literally, some people are moving out down to the wire, you know, the day of. And you're just hoping that it's at least in some kind of reasonable state of cleanliness when your sellers or your buyers are coming in on the tail end.
I would just, what props to mind is it's always good to keep a good relationship with the other agent.
Yes.
And you can call them and say, hey, how's it looking? How are your folks? You know, am I going to have any problems on completion? And just keep that dialogue going.
Yes. Yeah.
If you don't burn that bridge negotiating, then, these are things you can ask.
Totally. And that's actually a good point. We may want to talk about burning negotiating bridges at some point.
You're a pro? Or you're good at not doing that?
Still need to be friends with people right up until the end, 100%. I think in terms of preventing this, like, sure, maybe communication with like the seller's agent, making sure that they're prompting their people. I think there's going to be some reaction stuff too, like on the day out when you realize that you've walked into that, you know, making sure that you've got good house cleaners that you can call at the drop of a dime. I mean, we have walked into homes that have been like not lived in, but dirty because the sellers just abandoned ship at that point, gave up and walked out. And then you want your buyers to have a nice experience where they're walking into a clean, you know, nice, new, fresh home. So there's like things like that you can be prepared for as a buyer's agent. Also, I don't want to get too legal about this here today, but we have used what's called a holdback clause in some instances where you're right, you walk in. We have often done it even with tenants, like places where like homes are tenanted and it's a disaster, and we're like, we know we're gonna need like $2,500 to like patch holes on walls, call a handyman, and clean a place out before you move in or before our buyers move in. And sometimes putting, you know, that holdback clause in the contract saying like, if the seller doesn't take care of all of this, we're gonna hold back $2,500 or $1,000 or $500, whatever's appropriate, for our buyers to remedy whatever shitstorm we walk into, if and when we walk into an inevitable shitstorm. So you're right, you can predict some of them. So you were asking about preventative things, and I feel like we could dive even deeper into preventative things, because there's, I mean, let's face it, even just the contacts you have, like who's at the other end of your speed dial, right? Your speed, and that's going to be A, preventative, but also B, reactionary, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is a lot easier after having a bunch of sales under your belt. You know who you need to call in whatever situation. You know how to solve that problem. Even if you don't know exactly how to solve the problem, you know the method that we're going to use to solve the problem. And a lot of our problem solving is done through like having a team, having a bunch of people who are, you know, on the clock, dedicated to getting this stuff done. So it's not all of your, you know, what you have your sales agent hat on. You're not also worried about paperwork or the brokerage compliance stuff.
Yeah, okay, fair, for sure. But I mean, like, I'm thinking about the early days. Like, I mean, you know, we're using, again, this, like, example of, like, a hyperbole of, like, the worst case scenario.
Right.
But when we think about how many points where a sale can break down, where, you know, you can have something small turn into, like, a molehill, and it's ruining your day, and you don't know what to do. There's people like, yes, the team is good, but there's other people, like the auxiliary people, whether you're a solo agent or whether you're on a team, that you need to have at the end of your speed dial. And I'm thinking of like some early people that I mean, obviously you and I work together, and I feel like you're one of my superpowers. Like there's a lot of stuff that would not have happened fast.
We have a very different skill set. Yeah. Which complements it.
Totally. But now, like, okay, so at the end of my speed dial, a plumber is huge. Like there have been so many deals where it's like, bring a plumber in, like somebody wants to add a bathroom, something's going wrong, even small things that are like, okay, don't even get me started. This has happened like 1,000 times. You're in an inspection, the inspector says blah 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 blah, and now all of a sudden
the sky's falling and the world's about to collapse.
Right.
The house is about to collapse.
Right. The house is bulldozer bait, and you're like, wait a minute, I feel like that was just a water line, like, you know, on a toilet or on a water. And you're like, okay, let's all stay calm here. Let's figure out cost of this. Let's, you know, you're trying to troubleshoot. And that moment, especially if your client's in love with the property and is now getting terrible news that they think the home is awful, you need to have trades at the other end of your speed dial. So I'm thinking like plumber. That's been one that's come in super handy. Honestly, like, I don't know what part of the country or the continent you're in, but drain tile people that can take a look in the drain tiles. So, you know, having some trades, and I will say electrician, this is a big one in my area. I don't know if it is in yours, but having somebody who can look at the electrical and gauge how safe it is, because we're selling 1970s homes with aluminum wiring. I mean, heck, in my area, we're sometimes selling 1920s, 1900 homes, turn of the century homes with knob and tube wiring. We need to understand like the cost of removing these things, and the difference, having the right person that can come and just have your back and have a real conversation with you and your clients, even whether it's a conference call or in person, can make or break the scenario for everybody involved, right?
Yeah, I'd add pest control guy to that.
Pest control.
Rats are gross and freak everyone out.
Junk removal.
Yep, junk removal. I'm going to do a shameless plug for a place called We Haul Cheap. If you're in my area, if you're in Victoria, BC, We Haul Cheap, we love you because you've saved our butts on many foreclosure and just like awful mess of a situation, right? So you want to have your junk removal, you want to have pest control, you want to have like trades, plumbers, electricians, movers, right? Like honestly, if you're there by yourself and you cannot execute certain things, you want to have movers that'll show up and do a good job and be professional and, you know, not freak out your clients. Like there's so many people that you could call on or have in your speed dial that could actually save you from, you know, these types of situations too, I would say. There's not necessarily preventative, but could be in some situations. Get a Greg. Like, actually get a Greg. I don't know, having somebody, like, I think there's been, like, again, there's been so many times where there's been small things. Like, we were just talking about a situation where a client of ours had agreed to leave furniture with the property and then forgotten that they had agreed to leave the furniture with the property. So being able to run over, grab that furniture and take it back to the house really quickly, or being able to run over and put, maybe the inspector says, hey, you need new smoke detectors. That happens all the time. Being able to run over and just pop some of those in. You've been able to do a lot of that stuff for me, which has been like my superpower.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that an experienced homeowner, even an experienced realtor could handle on their own. But it's always good to get an expert opinion as well.
Totally. And just I think speed dial. I think get your speed dial dialed in, for lack of a better term, right? Because you need to know who you're going to call in these situations. And if you don't have somebody, take a few people out to lunch, get those relationships formed, because you're going to need you want them to like you, and you want them to pick up the phone fast when they see your number, because you're going to probably need them in a pinch.
Well, we've just discussed your first home purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Do we learn a lot?
I feel like we learned a ton. You know what? Funny.
Yeah, I mean, you're better. You're better than you used to be, but that wasn't your fault, that project.
It wasn't my fault, but here's the key things to take away from that. Number one, you're right. Assess the situation from the beginning, right? So if you're representing the buyers, have some reasonable expectations about what situation you're walking into. If the walls are painted black and the ceiling's painted red and the windows are boarded up, you're probably not going to have a smooth completion. Maybe just understand that from the onset. Prepare your people, prepare the buyers, and kind of stay on top of that situation right from the get-go. Use whatever tools you can. Maybe that involves holding some money back, or maybe that just involves really a strong understanding and preparation of the team you're going to need walking into that, right? In a more mild situations, I'd say the key takeaway is just making sure as seller agents, as the listing agent, we can prepare our sellers to make sure they understand what's expected of them. They're probably not doing this stuff on purpose. They're probably just missing things. Moving day is hectic. There's a lot of stuff going on, and they probably just don't know. They're not doing this every day. So just really setting up the expectations on the sell side.
Yeah. I think something else you learned there was make sure you get a damage deposit before your dirtbag sellers or renters move in. Because once I moved in, I didn't pay that damage deposit.
Oh my God.
You should have got that in advance. Yeah.
You didn't pay your damage deposit?
You attempted to get me to pay it.
Oh yeah, that's
for
right.
months.
You held out on me.
It's amazing we're together.
Dirtbag tenants indeed. Okay. So yes, doing things in advance and in writing. Thanks for that.
And being a landlord can often suck.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
That's a whole other podcast.